You've seen the footage, a crab boat in the Bering Sea, 40-foot waves slamming into the hull, white water exploding over the deck, the whole vessel rolling so hard it looks like it's about to flip completely over. And somewhere below all of that chaos, wedged into a box barely wider than his own shoulders, a fisherman is fast asleep, not resting, not lying there wide awake gripping the rails and praying. Asleep, dead asleep, while the ocean outside is doing everything it can to kill every man on board. And here's the part that stops most people cold. That box he's sleeping in, that coffin-sized bunk with maybe 18 inches of space above his face, isn't small because the boat was cheap or because nobody bothered to build something better. It's small on purpose. Every single inch of it was designed that way, and the reason why is the difference between a solid 4 hours of sleep and a broken neck. There are three things happening here. The first is why the bunk is that tiny in the first place. The second is the design that keeps a sleeping man alive while a storm throws 30 tons of steel around like a bath toy. And the third is something almost nobody outside the commercial fishing world has ever even heard of. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these men choose to sleep in a box the size of a coffin and why most of them wouldn't trade it for anything. So let's start with the obvious question. Why is the bunk so small? You'd think a boat that spends weeks at sea in the most brutal conditions on Earth would at least give its crew a decent place to sleep. But that assumption misses what a boat like this actually is. A Bering Sea crab boat is not a hotel, it's a factory. Every cubic foot of space on that vessel is fighting for a job, and sleeping is near the bottom of the list. The center of the boat is dominated by the catch holds, refrigerated tanks that can hold well over 100,000 pounds of live crab. That crab is the entire reason the boat left the dock. A single good haul can be worth several $100,000, so the fish take priority over the men. Everywhere else you've got fuel tanks, the engine room, bait storage, hydraulics for the crane, and the pot launcher, the processing area, and the wheelhouse up top. What's left over, the leftover pockets of space tucked low in the hull, becomes crew quarters. That's it. The bunks aren't designed around comfort, they're squeezed into whatever room the working parts of the boat didn't already claim. So the fisherman doesn't get a bedroom. He gets a slot. And that slot is often just a plywood or aluminum frame, a thin foam pad, a curtain to block the light, and barely enough headroom to roll over. But here's where it gets interesting, because even if you gave these men all the space in the world, even if you built them a king-size bed in the middle of that boat, they still wouldn't want it. And to understand why, you have to understand what actually happens to a human body when a ship rolls. When a boat gets hit by a wave, it doesn't just move up and down. It rotates, it pivots around an invisible line running through its center, rolling side to side and pitching front to back. And here's the key: the farther you are from that center point, the more violently you get thrown. Up high in the wheelhouse, the motion is savage. Out of the bow, the boat slams down off the back of every wave hard enough to launch loose objects into the ceiling. But down low, near the middle of the hull, close to that pivot line, the motion is at its absolute mildest. That's exactly where the crew bunks are, not by accident. Low and central is the calmest place on a violently moving ship. But even in the calmest spot, the boat is still rolling 30 to 40 degrees to each side, so calm is relative. And that's where the size of the bunk stops being a problem and becomes the whole solution. A big, roomy bed on a boat in a storm is a death trap. There's nothing to stop you. You'd slide, roll, and get flung out onto the steel deck every time the vessel heeled over. But a coffin bunk? A slot that's barely wider than your body? You can't go anywhere. Your shoulders touch one wall, your body fills the space, and when the boat rolls hard, You're wedged in tight instead of sliding free. The tightness is the feature. The box is holding you in place. And on the open side, the side facing out into the cabin, there's one more piece of the puzzle. It's called a lee cloth, sometimes a bunk board. It's a strip of heavy canvas or a low wooden panel that runs along the edge of the bunk, and it does one job. It stops you from being thrown out when the boat rolls toward the open side. $50 of canvas and rope. That's the barrier between a sleeping man and the floor. Combine the tight walls, the low central position, and that LE cloth, and you've got a sleeping man locked into the safest, stillest pocket on a boat that's actively trying to throw him around. But now here's the question nobody likes to ask out loud. What happens if the boat doesn't just roll? What happens if it goes over? Picture it. It's 3 in the morning. You're wedged in your bunk, dead asleep after 18 hours on deck. Outside, the water is 34 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold enough that a man who falls in without protection loses the use of his hands in minutes and slips under not long after. And a rogue wave, a wall of water bigger than all the others, catches the boat at the wrong angle. It rolls past the point of no return. Now every advantage flips into a nightmare. You're below deck, you're in a tight space that's suddenly upside down and filling with freezing water. The very things keeping you safe in the roll, the walls, the lee cloth, the position deep in the hull are now between you and the way out. This is the reason so many fishing vessel tragedies happen with the crew trapped below. It's why the good captains drill one rule into everyone. Know your exit in the dark, blind, half asleep, because you may have seconds. The bunk that keeps you alive in the storm is the same bunk you have to be ready to abandon in an instant. That's the trade every one of these men accepts the moment they climb into it. Now, most people assume each fisherman at least gets his own bunk. On the bigger boats running around the clock, that's often not even true. And this is the part almost nobody knows about. It is called hot bunking or hot wrecking. On a boat running full crews and rotating watches, there are not always enough bunks to go around, so 2 men share one. While one is up on deck working the pots for his 6 or 8 hour stretch, the other is asleep in the bunk. When the shift ends, they swap. One rolls out, the other rolls in. And the bunk is never cold because a body was just in it. That is where the name comes from. The rack stays hot. To an outsider, it sounds miserable crawling into a stranger's warm bed. To a fisherman running on almost no sleep, that warmth is a gift. The bed's already heated up for you. And that gets to the thing that surprises people most. Ask a man who slept through a Bering Sea storm in a box the size of a coffin whether he'd rather have been on dry land in a real bed. A lot of them will tell you no. Because when you've been awake for a full day and night hauling 40-pound crab pots in freezing spray with your whole body screaming and you finally wedge yourself into that tiny slot, the violent rolling stops feeling like danger. It starts feeling like being rocked. The groan of the hull, the deep thud of the waves, the hum of the engine 2 decks down, it all blends into something steady. Men who've done it describe it as the hardest, deepest sleep of their lives. Total exhaustion meeting total safety in the smallest space imaginable in the middle of the most dangerous water on the planet. So the next time you see footage of a crab boat getting hammered by a storm, remember that somewhere below that deck, in a box barely bigger than his own body, a man is sleeping better than you probably will tonight. Not because he has to, because that tiny bunk is doing exactly what it was built to do. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you be able to sleep in a coffin-sized bunk while 40-foot waves slam the hull all night? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one. And if you learned something today, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.